Hi Rahul, I hope you're feeling good.
Oh, wonderful. I'm here in Bhubaneswar, lovely city. I was asking our host if the breeze still blows at 4:30 from the sea. And she wasn't very certain about that. Is it still blowing nicely, coming in? Cool breeze? 4:30 in the afternoon?
I guess we'll find out. You're here for another day. But I guess we're good to go. Is this your first time visiting Odisha?
No. I've been here a few times, yes.
Okay. A lot of people in Odisha know you. And because, with your body of work, the amount of coverage you've done and the, platforms you've been associated with, you are an household name. My father has been an admirer of your reporting and your debates.
You better say that a bit softly, because not everyone admires my work. I'm quite a polarizing figure.
But recently, I think you do not. Okay. Can you hear me? Audible?
Yes.
Okay. I think Rahul is a household name. He needs no introduction, so I will not, insult him by introducing to anybody. The video in itself was encompassing. So we'll jump right into the discussion. So the focal point of this discussion is obviously the book that you have recently written, Modi and India 2024 and the Battle for Bharat. So right off the bat, is the book about Modi? Is it a political potboiler that it sounds like?
If it was a book about Mr. Modi, it would have been probably as thick as that. I don't think one can do justice to his career in a book that's about 230 odd pages, with 100 pages of just annotations. This book is not about any individual. It's a very balanced account of what Mr. Modi aspires this country to be. So it's an interrogation of basically an idea, a bunch of ideas. That's what this book is about, and it's a co-authored book. My colleague Siddharth Talia from a previous organization and I got together. It was something that came right up. Very surprisingly, one of the editors at Penguin, Premanka Goswami, walked in to my office with another luminary, really, and Vikram Sampath. Everyone's probably heard of Vikram Sampath. You probably haven't heard much about me, but nonetheless, they both came in and they said, look, why don't you write? Because, we've been looking at your articles, you've got a thought going and this, that, the other. Why don't you write a book? And why don't you write it on the elections? I said, look, I think you're overestimating me. I'm not one of those guys who really hits the ground and has my finger on the nation's pulse. So I'm not even a cephalogist. I'm an ideas guy. So they said, why don't you write about an idea? And that got me thinking. And just after they left, I turned to the whiteboard and I sort of sketched out the outline of this book. I said, and we can obviously come to that in just a few moments, and I sort of worked it out on a flow chart and then got back to them and I said, I think I have an idea. So the book is really about the idea. Okay,
fair enough. Why did you personally feel inclined to write something? Because you say that it's not an individual account of Modi ji, but rather the idea, as you put it. Could you elaborate on the idea and why personally you felt responsible that you should write this book? Yeah.
Well, to be honest, this book does look at the election in 2024 as a watershed. Now, as a journalist who's, I would say, center-right, and I'm in no certain terms, I'm politically maybe a bit on the right, but culturally I'm very liberal. We're all liberals, actually. The word here, of course, conservative is sort of misunderstood. Basically, I would be very centrist if I was in America, but here you're sort of denotated as, pro-Modi, and anti-Modi, so that's the way it is. But I think, let's just put it this way, the detractors of Mr. Modi and the BJP say that, look, after 2024, India is going to be unrecognizable as an entity, constitutional entity. And the term that was used by Shashi Tharoor, who's probably the most eloquent person in the opposition benches, has come out and said that, look, India is going to become a Hindu Pakistan. That we're going to be turned irrevocably into a Hindu Rashtra that is very narrow in its thinking and exclusivist. in the way it sort of militates against certain denominations, Muslims in particular. And if you say it often enough, you begin to wonder if that's really what is happening, because there's been a constant number of steps that the government in its second iteration, 2019, began to take. And one obviously gets a bit rattled and also curious. And since they were doing a few things that I had written about when, back in 2000 for the Times of India, when I was a very young person on the edit page, I found it very difficult to sort of reconcile with the opposition's critique of these ideas. I mean, I've championed the UCC, I championed the abrogation of 370 and Article 35A for years altogether. In fact, I think I'm the most consistent journalist. I've seen a lot of journalists who've actually changed, sides, but I believed what I believed. And in the Times of India, I remember when I wrote this piece about the abrogation of Article 370, the very next day, my editor, the edit page editor, wrote a piece contradicting me. So even then, there was this reflex, oh my God, don't talk about things that have acquired a kind of status quo in this country. So I just find it rather intriguing because, amongst liberals, you're supposed to be open to different points of view. But I find that I met somebody the other day who is the scion of a political family, a person who I actually went to school with, and she was in my class, and I was at this party, and she's a top-ranking politician's child, and she said to me, "Hi, Rahul, how are you?" And I sort of did mischievously go up and ask her how she was. And she said, "I'm fine, but what have you guys done? You've killed debate in this country." I'm saying, "But we're already beginning a debate." And then I said, "But why do you feel like, and then she sort of went off into a bit of a rant. And then I said, "Why don't you read my book?" She said, "I'll burn the book if I ever laid my hands on it." And I said to her, "But you're a liberal, aren't you?" And I walked away smiling. But I find that this visceral sort of lack of appreciation for another point of view is worrying for me. And I don't have much of that. So I just thought that, maybe the time has come to put down all my thoughts in a book. And my co-author and myself worked very hard on making sure that it is very well annotated, because I know that I'm pretty much on the hit list, so everyone will sort of start shredding the book the moment it comes out. So it has 101 pages of annotations, and I have to say I was very, very generous of Salman Khurshid and Pavan Verma to actually review the manuscript. This actually is not the book. This is the manuscript of the book. So it says at the bottom, "Uncorrected proof, not for sale or quotation," because Penguin only gave me 3 copies of the book. But I have this. And Salman said, "Intensely researched argument about an alternative idea of India." Vivek Debroy said, "Focuses on how dharma provides the foundation of a new republic." And then Pavan Verma and others, meticulously researched arguments. So all of them talk about the research. And that's what makes this thesis very compelling, because it is deeply researched. And my thesis is that, look, a dharmic civilization like ours will not become a Hindu Rajya. People confuse the term Hindu Rashtra with Hindu Rajya. We are already a Hindu Rashtra. Just like America is a Christian Rashtra, Christian nation. Just like Britain is not only a Christian nation, but also a Christian Rajya. But they're all very secular countries. And there's a reason for it, which I explain. And I think that the civic iteration of Christianity that the British and then, of course, the Americans evolved in 1700 was borrowed very much from the larger philosophy, the outlook that the Hindu view on life, not even the way, we are not a way, we're a view on life, basically projects. And they got inspired by our way, and unfortunately we've had an interruption in the normal, what would have been a continuum of the Hindus view on life. We've had, because of settler colonization, some interregnums. And I think a whole bunch of people basically worked very hard, and some of them come from my family. So I know how the Marxist mind can work.
The Thapars?
The Thapars, yes. So I know how they took the Hindu out of the Bharatiya, and how this project unfolded intellectually, and where it has actually left us today. Where, as Pawan Verma writes, a deracinated bunch of Indians began to reflexively doubt anyone who wanted to talk about or revive our Hindu-ness.
I think as you put it, there are people who are out to burn this book, right? And as you pointed out, not very liberal of them to burn this book. I think we have a satanic verse on our hands. But the title is a curious one. When I was going through
actually, I disagree. It's not a satanic verse, because it's critical of the BJP's outlook on certain issues. It's a very, I think if people were to give it a chance, and I'm glad that it's on the bestseller list, but if the other side were to embrace it, they would come away perhaps feeling a little more reassured, but they also might find that they may not have a plank to oppose Modi going into 2024. So this book sort of answers that fundamental question: are we becoming a Hindu Rashtra under Modi? As the left says, that this is the last chance to stop him.
Someone I highly regard puts it very beautifully. They say that the only way you can, evolve is when you confront discomfort, right? But talking about the title of the book, I see that you have very intentionally used the words India and Bharat in stark contrast. What does those two words mean? And if you were to address this nation, what would you address it as Bharat or India?
Look, I think India that is Bharat, Bharat that is India, I think the Constitution makes it quite clear, Article 1. They're interchangeable. So I'm not going to get into that debate. I think it's a rather facile debate. I think it's more of a political debate. Ascribing names and labels has become a pastime, a political pastime. So who you don't like, you ascribe a certain set of denominations to. Who you want to sort of co-opt, you ascribe and assign a certain number of words to, etc., or labels to. So forget that. The book is, yes, interesting because, you see, a lot of people don't quite represent the name of the India Alliance accurately. It has no dots, actually. That is, again, a way that the BJP has sort of chosen to try and suggest that it is only the Indi Alliance or India bloc. But it's not quite that. The name actually doesn't have, if you look at when the India bloc was formed, they don't have an I.N.D.I.A, right? So this actually does stand for their alliance. Therefore, Modi and India. So it's a double entendre. The word Bharat actually, the book was written, was commissioned last year in November. We always intended it to be Bharat because that's the idea, the civilizational idea that we wanted to capture. I think that, as someone has just reviewed this book for the Open magazine, has said that there is a possibility for a modern India to coexist with the civilizational Bharat, right? And that's what this book sort of tries to suggest. Therefore, the battle for the soul of Bharat, that's what 2024 is about. So the title of the book is all encompassing. There is a double entendre. The idea is to sort of draw people in. And since it was written and actually completed by June, we'd already homed in on Bharat before it became really a talking point in the media, or before, the Prime Minister was described as a Prime Minister of Bharat and then became a big debating point during the G20 around then. So this title was already there, and it so captures the zeitgeist that we were quite surprised. Okay. Yeah.
So in your book, you mention, and you write it beautifully, that there was a Marxist plot to take the Hindu out of India. What do you mean by that?
The Indian.
The Indian, my bad.
So look, fundamentally, I believe that this is quite true of some friends of mine. A very intelligent person who's written an autobiography very recently and put it out. He was a CEO for a top company and now has written his memoir. He was at a party, he recalls this instance, and he was in, what people say is the Latvian circuit, right? And he started talking about Bharatiya Sabhyata. And people said to him, have you turned a fundu? Have you become a fundamentalist, a Hindu fundamentalist? And he was sort of taken aback because that moniker doesn't describe him at all, okay? So the fundamental point is that over a period of time, a number of stratagems were used to suggest a lot of things about our Hindu civilization. There was an attempt to sort of chip away at it. Of course, the British were past masters at it because they had to justify why they were here. They were here to colonize us because our culture was not so evolved. Now, what was our culture? Our culture essentially was a Hindu culture. And the Marxists continued this project in different ways. And that also translated into policy, actually. Fundamentally, many people say that discriminatory policies have been passed by this government. Actually, if you really look at it, the greatest political and legislative interventions that were ever done, which were discriminatory, were under previous dispensations that call themselves the flag bearers of liberalism in this country. And I can list 8 or 9 of them for you. They were quite significant, actually. I asked this question once. Someone asked me, oh, but this government has also done this, that, the other. And I said, name me one which discriminates against one particular set of people, right? The CA, some people say. And there was one, people talk about a act that was brought in Gujarat. But that was also under a Congress regime, but then modified a little bit, that made buying properties in Gujarat in certain areas a no-no. So you could say that was an exclusivist, policy. Now the CA is fundamentally not exclusivist. And we argue that, and we also quote a top advisor to the government, a legal advisor, who actually believes that it is exclusivist. So that is also in the book. But the CA isn't because, it's funny, we forget our history, and since we're in the East, Gopinath Bordoloi Sahab, a letter was written to him by Nehruji. And he said, look, we must allow for our Hindu brothers fleeing at that time East Pakistan, must give them. And we must identify the Muslim refugees who are also coming in and make sure that there is a very clear distinction between our Hindu brothers who are fleeing persecution in eastern Pakistan and also the Muslim refugees who are coming. So fundamentally, that idea was already there, right? The notion of a CAA, a select bunch of people being brought in, you created a particular grouping, right? And that has existed even in America. You've had the Lautenberg Amendments, you've had the Specter, laws, you've had a lot of these laws which exist. They're not violative of the basic structure. In fact, Muslims are constantly still getting citizenship that are fleeing, persecution in different parts of the country. This is only to create a classification, to expedite someone's citizenship, that's all. It didn't mean rejecting Muslims from getting citizenship. So basically, I'm just trying to tell you that a whole stream of interventions were brought in to try and suggest that, our Hinduness is discriminatory inherently when it's not actually.